All right. So we are doing the last week of the forgiving challenge, and this one is called sanctification, and it talks about, and there's two aspects of that story in John that we're talking about in John 21, and so what I want us to do is we will listen to John 21 1 through 19, and we'll listen to that, and I want you to pay special attention to breakfast with Jesus on the beach, and also pay attention to the part after the feed my sheep. And so that's kind of what we're focusing on, but I want us to hear it all in context. All right, so here we go. So, I need to make sure before I switch it over that I got the correct window up. Oh, I do. Well, look at that. Look at that. All right, and then optimize for video, share. Okay, so all right, and to those online, let me know if for whatever reason the echo doesn't go away. Here we go.
After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, and in this way he showed himself. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them,
I am going fishing. We are going with you also.
They went out and immediately got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. But when the morning had now come, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus.
Children, have you any food?
No!
Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some.
So they cast, and now they were not able to draw it in because of the multitude of fish. Therefore that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, It is the Lord. Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garments, for he had removed it, and plunged into the sea. But the other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from land, but about 200 cubits, dragging the net with fish. Then, as soon as they had come to land, they saw a fire of coals there, and fish laid on it, and bread.
Bring some of the fish which you have just caught.
Simon Peter went up and dragged the net to land, full of large fish, 153. And although there were so many, the net was not broken.
Come and eat breakfast.
Yet none of the disciples dared ask him, Who are you? Knowing that it was the Lord. Jesus then came and took the bread and gave it to them, and likewise the fish. This is now the third time Jesus showed himself to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. So when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter,
Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these?
Yes, Lord. You know that I love you.
Feed my lambs.
He said to him again, a second time,
Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?
Yes, Lord. You know that I love you.
Tend my sheep.
He said to him the third time,
Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?
Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, Do you love me?
Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you.
Feed my sheep. Most assuredly, I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish.
This he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him,
Follow me.
Okay, that's all we need to do today. Well, we got some more later, but okay. So Today's is all about sanctification. It's a big churchy word that you maybe have learned in confirmation class, 70 years ago. And so like that. And so what does sanctification mean?
To make holy.
Something to make holy? Yeah. What does that mean? that's a correct definition.
There you go. You asked.
Like that. So does anyone else have to make holy? Does anyone want to add to that?
To be without sin?
To be without sin? Maybe.
Not, not technically, but
like what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
That Jesus stands before me in the eyes of God. He doesn't see me for what I've done. So in that sense, I've been made clean because Jesus has taken it on himself.
Okay. I'll disagree a little bit, but you're on the right track. You're on the right track. Like that. Does anyone else want to add some fun into that?
I always thought that it was sealing up what was to be.
Sealing.
Sealing. SEALING.
Oh, sealing. Hey, come on in.
Sealing up.
Yeah.
We got one.
Yeah. We've got one for you. You're really close to the TV, but we got one. Yeah. Okay, so sealing up, like it's so kind of like working like a definition, like kind of like what Lee was saying, kind of. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to add?
Does it also mean like set apart or like
set aside? I think.
Yeah. Or
set aside.
Like your special.
Like that. So before I tell you, we'll play with the creed real quick. So there's 3 articles to the creed. The first article is about God the Father, who the Creator, right? The Creator. So God the Father, the Creator. So then you have the second article is God the Son, the Savior, Redeemer. Redeemer is kind of the Lutheran language that we use. So God the Father, the Creator, God the Son, the Redeemer, and then you have the third article is God the Holy Spirit, the Sanctifier. So what is that part of the creed? Because I think when I was little, I always like that just always got lumped into it's just like the Holy Spirit's part is like this catch-all, it's like I believe in the Holy Spirit, check, the Holy Christian Church, check, communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and life everlasting, right? Like that's like that. We always look at like those things as checks, and they're not really connected. As being a very learned pastor now, that all that stuff, I really, I really see that as that sanctification there. That all of that is the work of the Spirit. So I believe in the Holy Spirit. The church, the Spirit is what gathers the church together. I believe in the Holy Catholic Church, the unified church. Catholic means unity. It doesn't mean Rome. It means unity. I believe in the Holy United Church. Right? That is something that the Spirit does, because we see what our own sinfulness does to the church. It causes us to separate. The Spirit is what drives us together. I believe in the Holy Christian Church, the communion of saints. Again, it's kind of this idea of bringing us all together. Well, and it's All Saints Sunday this Sunday, and when we celebrate communion, what we celebrate is that we believe that we together are there, but all the saints before us and all the saints after us are all even the saints up in Fort Pierce and Tupelo, Mississippi, like that. That's even those in Yeehaw Junction. I don't know, that might be going a little too far, but that we are all at that together. All right, this is Chris Escher opinion. This is not the opinion of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. This is an opinion of Chris Escher. I think I think that's why closed communion is not biblical. Back into Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, because if we say that all the saints before us and all the saints are after us are there with us together, like that, that's like that, like so that's what are we confessing? Are we confessing our own righteousness? Anyway, so the communion of saints. So we believe that we're all together. That we have been all together. The forgiveness of sins. Like the work of the Spirit working to bring forgiveness, to bring righteousness to us, and all these things. And the communion of forgiveness and the resurrection of the body. The Spirit is what will rise us up, And so those are all sanctifying acts to make us holy, right? And the sanctification is the process of making holy. The way I describe my confirmation kids to it is that when their mom goes up to them and goes, you need to take the dishes out of the dishwasher and put them away, it's not that their mom or dad or whatever needs them to do that. It's a help, but it's not that. Usually have to supervise over them and all that stuff. They're giving them the skills to be adults. Right. So like that's a lot of chores, that we give kids and all those things. It's being given the skills to be adults. And a lot of what sanctification is, if you look at that bottom part of the creed, it's that building up and making holy, like that, all those things. So with that in mind, think about some of the things that we talk about here. My question for us as we think about this is, where did the fish come from? Mm-hmm. Where did the fish come from? Because, so the disciples, Jesus is like, throw your net on the other side, throw your net on the other side. And they pull in, they have 153 fish and all these fish, it's like, what does that say? 100 yards, or so it says 200 cubits in the King James. 100 yards. Yeah. And so a cubit is from here to here. That's what a cubit is. It's not standardized, but it is standardized to you. And so, so cubits, 200 cubits out, and they dragged the net ashore. And verse 9, then as soon as they came to land, they saw the charcoal fire that we've been talking about, the charcoal fire, and fish on it, and bread. Where did the fish come from? Like where did the fish come from?
He went to the fish market on the way to the barbecue.
He went to the fish market on the way to barbecue? Yeah.
The Lord put them in the sea.
Yeah. So, it's the fish were already there. They bring everything to shore, and the fish are already there. Mm-hmm. Like Jesus has already started a fire and all that. But then what does Jesus say? It's the end of verse 10. Oh, verse 10. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish which you have just got. Mm-hmm. Like this has always been like, we wanted to talk about this one in the sermon on this, but it was already long and it would have been a completely different topic. So we're hitting it here. Mm-hmm. Like that's the question is why is there fish on the fire already? And why does he say bring more fish? How would you handle? Because he does both. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense.
Are the fish representing the people?
Like the people? Like what do you mean by the people?
Just the population. In other words, when he says take care of my sheep, are the fish the sheep? He has some, but he's telling them they're going to have to bring more. And he's telling them how to do it.
Okay, yeah. No, I think you're onto something there. I think you're onto something there. Like what? How else would you describe this? Because it's an interesting conundrum. Like there's fish on the fire already. And I think this is all part of the sanctification. I think this is still part of the restoration of Peter. Which means it's still part of the restoration of ourselves.
Do as I have done. I'm feeding you, you feed others.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, like I think you're starting to get, because there's not like a cold, hard definition to this, but it's something that often gets glossed over. It gets glossed over and lost. I mean, I've been waiting this whole Bible study for someone to bring this up, and no one did. And I knew no one would, because it's not until we purposely looked at it one day that we were like, oh, like this fish is interesting. So like so like look at what I've done now, go do more. Like does anyone else have any fun ways that you may look at this? And I can tell you my fun way here in a little bit that I look at it, but it doesn't mean mine's right.
Well, it reminded me right away of feeding the 5,000. He created the food.
Yeah.
I don't know how that relates to sanctification. I can't link that in my head.
But I think that's a good connection. What's funny is that when we're about to go back in time in Mark, and we're going to begin at the feeding of the 4,000. But for different reasons. But yeah, so I think I mean Jesus could have went to a market and got the fish. Like that's very easy.
Well, he already knew where the fish were, so he could just gone fishing and gotten some himself.
Yeah, I think it's part of the continued miracle kind of thing. You know, like that there's a fish here.
Wherever he got the bread.
You got it wherever he got the bread. Yeah. And so like
Walmart.
Yeah. I think this is Jesus hitting us all, meeting us where we need to be taught, and it changes where we are. And this is what I mean by that. Some of us, sometimes we need, do what?
He's feeding them again.
Yeah.
Following after the Lord's Supper.
Yeah. And so I think some of us, we work so hard and we want to do so much, and we need to hear that the fish are already on the fire and just need to sit down.
I'm reading a commentary, Christmas commentary, and it's just basically saying what you're saying.
Is it?
Jesus is going to take care of our physical needs. We don't need to worry about it.
Yeah. And then others of us, you know, we need to hear, like, you need to go down and get more fish. You know? And so, and the wisdom and the discernment and the Holy Spirit is realizing what we need to hear in that time, because all of us have different defaults, you know? And I think in this one, it hits both sides. Like some sit down, you know, the fish are already here. Like just sit. And then some are like, go and get more. It's time.
Is the repeated feed my sheep, get more fish?
I think that's so if you remember last week, when we looked at Luke's version of this kind of story, you know, it's very similar in Luke's, and that's the calling of Peter and now Peter and Andrew. He says, I'm going to make you fisher of men. And this feed my lambs, I think it's hitting those same, it's rhyming.
Another echo.
Yeah. It's an echo. It's an echo of that call of be a fisher for men type of with the feed my lambs and all of those.
It reminds me of the disciple.
Yeah. Like it would. So like I think as we go forward in all of this, you know, and this is going to change throughout our entire lives, because sometimes we get caught in ourselves in doing too much, wanting too much, and we need to realize the fish are already on the fire. You know, and then there's other times in our lives when we need to get up and we need to haul the fish on the land, you know? And that's been a thing that has really challenged me. over the years. So then the next one is we come, and that's all. And Tracy, you're familiar with why the fire of coals there is so important, right?
Is it with like Peter's denial?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the same. That word's only used twice in the Bible.
Oh, okay.
And they're all right there together. So Peter's smelling his own denial as he's eating breakfast here, type of thing. Yeah. And so whenever Tracy comes back, it's like an old friend coming back in. You'll see that. Like that's.
Thank you for clearing it up.
Yeah. And so, come eat breakfast, and over there. Then we have this Jesus restoring Peter with like, "Do you love me? Feed my lambs." And the way that love statement is Jesus is saying, it's moving around between the two of the Greek words, phileo, like brotherly love, and agape. So the way I kind of move through it is when they'd eaten breakfast, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me with everything you got more than these? Which is agape. And he's like, yes, Lord, I love you like a brother. Like Simon, son of, feed my lambs. Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me with everything you got? Yes, Lord, I love you like a brother. Tend my sheep. And he said him a third time, and Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me like a brother? Like Jesus thing goes down to his.
May I reveal my ignorance? I keep stumbling on Simon, son of John. Do you love me more than these? These.
I think probably the people that are around him. Maybe. I don't know. What do you guys think? That's how I always looked at it.
The other disciples.
I always thought that it meant, do you love me more than your than you love your fellow disciples? But I read something just recently that I hadn't ever thought about, that it might have meant, do you love me more than your fellow disciples love me?
Okay.
And I had never read that or thought of that before.
Either way.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's very interesting. Like that's that kind of a little shade of difference there that makes it fun.
So is there an answer to my question?
I don't think so. But I think
you interpret it.
I think also that these there. I think the way John is so sneaky in his writing. He's very sneaky. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is that he's oftentimes using the words in the page to draw us into the stories. Mm-hmm. And I think especially this last one, this last chapter is so sneaky. Like think about how we just treated the fish, like my favorite way of looking at the fish and that. And then it's almost like we're being asked the same question, in the midst of our own denials and all that stuff. It's like, do you love me more than these? And what is these in front of you? What is these that we love more than anything else?
Money.
Yeah.
The house we live in.
Money, prestige, reputation. Yeah, the fish. Yeah, like that's like all those things. It's like, do you love me more than these? And I think it's interesting. Like, do you love it more than that? That makes it fun colorizing it, because Peter answers like, I love you like a brother. Like he doesn't give him the whole thing. And then Jesus finally comes to him in that last one. And let's see here. And he said a third time, mm-hmm. do you love me like a brother? Is how he uses it. He uses eros. And Peter's grieved because he asked him a third time. And then he also he diminishes it a little bit. And, and then he said, that I love you, and it's agape and above everything else.
Question.
Yeah.
It's ESV.
Yeah, the ESV.
Either I'm looking in the wrong place or I'm not seeing.
Yeah. Chapter 21.
Yeah.
Like what is that? Like the brother stuff?
Son John, do you love me?
Yeah. Yeah. He's got ESV too. So there's 3 words in Greek that mean love, that all three of them always get translated into just love in English. And so you have like philo, which is like Philadelphia, like brotherly love. You have agape, which is like love you above everything else type of idea. And then you have, what's the third one? Eros. Yeah, eros. Yeah, and that is what? Romantic. Yeah, that's right. So romantic love. So you have those. You have those three, and they all get translated as love. And so what I'm doing is I'm just using my knowledge of how the Greek works here, and I'm translating the loves.
And the next question is, again, Simon, son of John, do you love me? I'm not seeing more than these.
Yeah. So the first one, verse 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Verse 15.
I figured I was off on something.
Yeah. Verse 15.
Thank you.
Yeah. No problem. So he goes in, and then so Peter in verse 17, the end of 17, he says, "You know all things. You know that I love you more than anything else." Agape. And then this is the sanctification part here. So because we talked about the feeding my sheep in the past and all those things. And it goes right into this, which this is something that was called out to me studying this for this sermon series, was how Jesus goes straight from that, like Peter saying, "You know that I love you." And we always end it on Jesus then ends with "feed my sheep." Jesus, I don't even think takes a breath. He goes, Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep, most assuredly, I say to you." You know, when you were younger, you girded yourself. Well, that just means you made pants out of your robes. Like that's basically what that means. You girded yourself and you walked where you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands like on a cross, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish. And he says like exactly what this is about. He spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God when he had spoken this. And he said to him, "Follow me."
The NIV says when you were younger, you dressed yourself.
Dressed yourself. That's good. It's good language. You dressed yourself and you went where you wished, you know, and then he says like that whole stretch out your hands. And what's wild about that phrasing there is that how different that is taken by Peter. You know, it ends up changing the subject. We won't go into all that today, where they start talking about John and all that. But that fall, it's like Peter accepts it. Like going through this whole ending here, this restoration of Peter, this being on the boat, seeing the fish from the fire, do you feed my lambs? All that. It's like this full restoration. And that whole restoration has been working this process of sanctification in Peter, continuing to make holy, for himself to make holy into the future, to do the work of the church, you know, to go get the fish, right? Like to go do all those things. Because Jesus says, like, just as he said in Mark and these other gospels, you know, Jesus says, like, you know, we're going to be crucified and all that, and he's like, no, that'll never happen. And it's like he accepts it. He accepts it.
He understood what he was saying.
Yeah. That's definitely the way it goes forward, which I think is profoundly interesting in this. Did anyone have any thoughts concerning this thing? Because think about who Peter is now. Like think about Peter's reputation in the world. Peter's reputation in the world is not the butt of a joke, but kind of where when you die, you'll meet St. Peter in the pearly gates. You know, like that's. Like, I guarantee you have people just making Peter Pearly Gates jokes, even when they don't go to the church, they don't think about it at all. You know, like that's like think that is Peter's reputation now. You know, that like he is still, even in joking and all that stuff, he still is the head of the church. you know?
Yeah, the rock.
Yeah, the rock. Mm-hmm. Like all those things. Like that is who he is. And you think, and you look at the history of Peter, he still has like a rocky bringing in, but Acts, it has him, standing up. These people aren't drunk like you think they are. The great wind of God, wind, spirit, breath of God comes through, which is so, it's so hard to explain this to people. But in Pentecost, when the Spirit of God is brought onto the creation, think about put yourself in the Old Testament understanding of how everything was created at the beginning, right? You have to show off to Mick, Bereshit bara Elohim v'Shamayim v'haaretz, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. You guys remember what the next verse is? You guys remember?
And the Spirit of God dwelt
and hovered over the wind. Spirit, the same word for wind. It's the same word for breath. Like that's so. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the unformed waters. The wind of God was hovering over the waters. And then you have Spirit, breath, wind of God go out in Pentecost and is over there. It's the same illusion.
It's the new creation.
It's the new creation. Like it's such pretty, illustration about everything that's happening, and everyone starts talking in tongues, which our Pentecostal brothers and sisters often view that as like this like spiritual language, and that's fine. But I much prefer, because I think it fits with Acts better, is that it's suddenly the entire creation is singing and saying the praises of God who is bringing in this new creation. That all the nations of the world and all the tongues of the world are proclaiming this greatness of God, and everyone's like, "This is all silly. I don't know what's happening here." Which sounds very much like Paul when he says, "The name of Jesus, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess." It sounds very much like that. And so there's tons of Old Testament prophecies that have that kind of sounding. So you have this kind of new creation with the breath and wind, and people are like, these people are drunk. They're making no sense. And Peter's like, they're not drunk. And the same Peter who is presented as a bumbling idiot, we're going to get to that here in a second, through most of the Gospels, and then stands up. Now, he doesn't get everything right. He gets some things wrong coming up forward. But he stands up and does this incredible sermon, and this is Acts chapter 2, if you're looking for something to read. And so like that's and you're actually going through that in your group, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like in this, so he stands up and does all these things, and begins saying, that's that same. It's the same Peter from here. So you look at the work of sanctification that is going on inside of him. And the exciting thing that in the sermon that I brought out, and I think the most exciting thing about Peter is that his gospel that we believe that Peter wrote is the Gospel of Mark. And the Gospel of Mark is the hardest on Peter out of them all. Mm-hmm. It is the hardest on him. And I think he has gotten to a point now when the way that he tells the gospel, the way that he tells it is not like I got everything right, but like through my errors and sin and pain and all of that, Jesus still died and rose again. It's us. And that's us. Like that's, and we're supposed to see ourselves in that Peter. And I think that's why at the very end of Mark, it says, go tell the disciples in Peter. Like that's, so I'll go to the end of Mark real fast. Like that's, and we'll read some of Mark here.
I always thought if Peter was a dog, he'd be a pointer.
How far back do you want to go?
Let's see. I'm just going to read this just real fast. Mark 16. So it was the women are coming to the tomb. This is verse 3. They said amongst themselves, "Who will roll away the stone from the tomb, from the door of the tomb for us?" But when they looked up, they saw the stone had already been rolled away, for it was very large. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man clothed with white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth." Like this earthly name. Nazareth means the sticks. Like that. That's the middle of nowhere. Who was crucified, but he is risen. He's not here. See the place where they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter. Like that is the key to this gospel, is that that he points out Peter. And that you're going before you to Galilee, that you will see him as he said to you. So Peter is picked out at the very beginning, at the end there. So let's go to Mark chapter 8 real quick. Let's look at some of these foibles of Peter. Mark chapter 8 begins with the feeding of the 4,000. Now, there's two feedings in Mark. There's a feeding of the 5,000. There's a feeding of the 4,000. Feeding of the 5,000 happens inside of a Jewish region. Feeding of the 4,000 happens in a Gentile region. I think the Gentile region, the 4,000 is like the four corners of the earth. Is kind of what's being said about that. The 5,000 kind of seems like the Pentateuch, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Some very, the law. I don't know. Those are guesses. I could be wrong, but I'm not. and so you have the feeding of the 4,000, and then I want to listen to it being read from chapter 8, verse 11, all the way through 13. So we'll listen to this, because Peter has two big foibles right in a row here. But this is right off the back of the feeding of the 4,000. And I got to actually open up the correct tab. Here we go. See, I was ready. It's almost like I was doing lesson plans today. All right, here we go. All right, Mark chapter 8, beginning with verse 11.
Then the Pharisees came out and began to dispute with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven, testing him. But he sighed deeply in his spirit.
Why does this generation seek a sign? Assuredly, I say to you, no sign shall be given to this generation.
And he left them, and getting into the boat again,
right after the
departed to the other side. Now the disciples had forgotten to take bread, and they did not have more than one loaf with them in the boat. Then he charged them.
Take heed. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod.
And they reasoned among themselves.
It is because we have no bread.
But Jesus, being aware of it, said to them,
Why do you reason because you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive nor understand? Is your heart still hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember? When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets full of fragments did you take up?
12.
Also, when I broke the 7 for the 4,000, how many large baskets full of fragments did you take up?
7.
Oh, is it you do not understand?
Then he came to Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch him. So he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes and put his hands on him, he asked him if he saw anything. And he looked up.
I see men like trees walking.
Then he put his hands on his eyes again and made him look up. And he was restored and saw everyone clearly. Then he sent him away to his house.
Neither go into the town, nor tell anyone in the town.
Now Jesus entered.
Hold on one second. I just want to say something real fast. If I was preaching this weekend, we'd be saying it this weekend. Whenever you see a blind man being healed in the gospel, or someone just being healed, but specifically blind men, the gospel writers, I think, could be wrong about this, but they're saying the blind man sees. Do you see? Like so pay attention to everything that's going on around it. Like the disciples are blind, disciples and Peter are blind to the loaves, right? And so then we get into other big stuff that we're talking about now.
His disciples went out to the towns of Caesarea Philippi, and on the road he asked his disciples,
"Who do men say that I am?"
John the Baptist, but some say Elijah, and others one of the prophets.
"But who do you say that I am?"
Peter answered and said to him,
"You are the Christ."
Then he strictly warned them that they should tell no one about him. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke this word openly. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when he had turned around and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter.
"Get behind me, Satan! For you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men."
When he had called the people to himself, with his disciples also, he said to them,
"Whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? Whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him the Son of Man also will be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels."
Now after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, and led them up on a high mountain apart by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. His clothes became shining, exceedingly white like snow, such as no launderer on earth can whiten them. And Elijah appeared to them with Moses, and they were talking with Jesus.
"Rabbi, it is good for us to be here, and let us make 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah."
Because he did not know what to say, for they were greatly afraid. And a cloud came and overshadowed them, and a voice came out of the cloud.
"This is my beloved Son. Hear him."
Suddenly, when they had looked around, they saw no one anymore, but only Jesus with themselves. Now, as they came down from the mountain, he commanded them that they should tell no one the things they had seen, till the Son of Man had risen from the dead. So they kept this word to themselves, questioning what the rising from the dead meant.
Why do the scribes say that Elijah must come first?
Indeed, Elijah is coming first, and restores all things. And how is it written concerning the Son of Man, that he must suffer many things and be treated with contempt? But I say to you that Elijah has also come, and they did to him whatever they wished, as it is written of him.
And when he came to the disciples...
All right. So we'll end there. I don't know why I didn't read 9 verse 1. Yeah. 9 verse 1 is a bad chapter break anyway. So that's it really, it's a bad chapter break, because it really feels like it should go on from the Father and the holy angels. And he said to them, "Surely I say to you that some will stand. But you can see how it all works together. So what kind of, especially thinking about Peter here, and what do you think was interesting from our little section of reading?
Well, I think Peter doesn't get it. And I think that was a lot of the Jewish thought. They thought when the Messiah came, he's going to be this big warrior and defeat Rome and set up, the Jewish state as, rulers of the world. And when Jesus says, I have to die, that doesn't fit with Peter's idea of what the Messiah needs to do.
Yeah.
And then when Elijah and Moses are there, he's thinking, all right, it's starting.
Yeah.
This is it.
This is it. Yeah. Like that. Let's set it up. And that's what I love about that phrase. And it's why it's one of my favorites. I think it's a good expression there, is that verse 6 is like, he says, let's set up some tabernacles, some tents, some churches is how I like to translate it now. One for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. He didn't know what to say because they were greatly afraid. That's like he's basically, it's like he's being an idiot here. He said the wrong things. And I think like Peter is coming into the story going, don't do the same thing. I'm just telling you. Like that, like this isn't what we want you to do. And I think that's some revelation of the spirit of the book. And I think it's kind of evidence that probably is Peter is doing some of these edits, to the story. That little moment right there. It's like, we were just scared. We're saying dumb stuff,
Oh, sure. I think he was frightened, but if we were confronted, we want to do something also to commemorate that spot.
Exactly.
What we're trying to do.
Exactly.
What do we do?
Yeah, exactly. And I think like that's, yeah.
I'm going to come to Peter's defense.
You do that.
Very harsh. He's inept, he's stupid, he doesn't get it. I would only go as far as say he's like us, hapless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it. He's hapless.
Yeah.
More criticism that I'm having difficulty with.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and I use such strong language against it, so that you'll see it, because I think really the way all the Gospels are written, but especially Mark, and I think especially John there, especially at the end, is that we're supposed to see ourselves in Peter, that we are to glom on to him and the disciples,
which is why I prefer being happy.
Yeah. Like that's, but it's he's hapless, but he's also like aggressive in it, like pulling Jesus off to the side and going, no, like you're just as crazy talk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like that's like this is not how it's going to happen, which is fascinating when we get to how John ends it, and think about the Christian tradition of Peter and how he dies, and that he's also crucified, and he requests to be crucified upside down.
Mm-hmm.
He's so against it here. Mm-hmm. Yet the tradition, like he goes through this sanctification, this process of being made holy. It's this almost sending out, that he's getting it here, and that's what's beautiful about these works, that you see this evolution through the Gospels.
And it's God's work. We have the same spirit.
Yeah.
So even though we're hapless, he can use us however, like you said, you look what Peter, he's a rock of the church.
Yeah.
If we're in a situation and we need to comfort somebody, he'll give us those words. And, he even uses unbelievers.
Yeah, exactly.
Do his
do his work. Do his work.
Peter can be a rock. If Peter can be a rock, imagine how much better we can be.
And we have an example.
Yeah.
And God was trying to make the actually do something big.
Yeah. So going back into Peter's story in Acts, Peter's story really ends in Acts. It kind of goes on but for the first half of Acts, it's Peter's story, with the church. And then it switches over to Paul when you have the Damascus Road experience and all of those things. But Peter's story really ends in Acts with Cornelius. And the Cornelius story is where Peter sees as the vision and the dream of all the animals coming down, and God's like, eat. And he's like, I won't eat bacon. You know, I'm a good Jewish boy. I'm not gonna. The pulled pork. Yeah, the pulled pork sauce. Like that. That's
another Chris.
Yeah, that's another good pulled pork. And so it's so that comes down, and then when Peter wakes up and he goes over to Cornelius's house, which is this Roman officer, he realized that it wasn't about the pulled pork. You know, it wasn't about that. It was about these people. And when Peter has that revelation, like his story arc in Acts basically ends. Like, and it's like the purpose of him in the story is to get us to that point where we stop making it's about all these races and, you know, all that stuff that God has declared all clean, you know? And so that's what's going on here. But I think this is a good section in here in Mark, where you have, you know, Peter doing some stuff that's like, you know, that's kind of frustrating and all those stuff. And then it just continues on. You have multiple times when the little children are coming up to Jesus in the coming chapters, and the disciples are like, go away, you know, and they but Jesus is like, no, like it's the humble. It's not. And so this is how you read this section of Mark here. You have all these things about the children coming and the disciples aren't allowing him. This is all happening all the while the disciples keep talking to themselves about which one of them is the greatest. You know, so they're talking about which one's the greatest all the while they're not allowing little children to come. You know, so there's this juxtaposition, and that's also where the rich young ruler is that comes up, and you could tell Peter brings this guy up. It's like, this is it. This is it. If we can just become like this guy. And the story pulls the rug underneath Peter and basically says, like, it's like, no, Peter, if we can just become like you, that we can glom onto you and we find salvation is not found in the guy that's got everything together. That salvation is found in Jesus. And the way they put that is verse 23 of chapter 10, verse 23. And Jesus looked around and said to his disciples, how hard it is for those who have riches to enter the kingdom of God. And the disciples were astonished, that astonished word, astonished at his words. But Jesus answered, whenever you, in the Gospel of Mark, whenever you see fear, astonishment, some kind of that kind of reaction, those are signs of the resurrection of Mark. And so the disciples were astonished at his words, and Jesus answered again, children, which they've been pushing the children away. Children, how hard it is for those riches to enter the kingdom of God. It's easier for the camel to go through the eye of the needle than rich men to enter the kingdom of God. And they were greatly astonished. There's the word again, saying amongst themselves, well, then who can be saved? And like and Peter wants so desperately to glom onto this rich guy who's got his life in order. It's like, if we can just become like him, like, but Jesus said to him, with men, it is impossible. With God, all things are possible. All things are possible, like that. And Peter even says, like, we've given up everything to follow you. And Jesus is like, yeah, good. Yep. Keep going. Like that's good job there. But that's the key. That's the key. And this kind of goes back to what you and I were talking about with like discipleship process and all that stuff. And one of my greatest concerns is that there's a movement inside of Christianity today. I think it comes up again that is like, you know, this is the strict way that do these things and you will find salvation. They may not say that, but these churches are like, you got to do this, you got to live like this, you can't watch these movies, you can't do these outings anymore, you can't do, you know, all this stuff. And it's like it's trying to follow the man who's got his life all in order. But what Christianity is that that's the way of impossibility. And that we actually see that it's completely outside of us, that with God, the thing is possible, that it's not our own righteousness. It's not our own ability to get our lives in order and all that stuff that our salvation comes from. And you look at that, and this is what I love about the Gospel of Mark. And I think Luke does this too with it. But you look at it, and it's Jesus talks about his death and resurrection, and then there's like greatness in serving, and Jesus heals a blind man again. Remember, if like whenever a blind man's getting saved, it's like, do you, like the blind man sees, do you see? Do you see what's going on? And Jesus walks into Jerusalem. Like and so you have that phrase, with God, all things are possible. The blind man sees, and Jesus walks into Jerusalem. Do you see what's happening? Do you see? And that's incredible storytelling. And that all that storytelling in Mark wraps up with that angel going, go tell the disciples and Peter. And it's like it's coming to all of us. That it's go tell the disciples and us that Jesus is alive, and he'll see you down the road. And that's good, and that's good news for us all. That's good news for us all. So I may be a little aggressive on Peter, so we can take mixed language of being hapless, right? Like that's and so, but I think it all gets us to a very similar place, and like over there. So I think that's the sanctification part. And I think that whole story is wrapped up in that couple verses there near the end of 2021. That it's like, you'll go where you wanted to go when you were young, but when you're older, they're going to do all that same stuff. And I think all that story is wrapped up in that phrase. And that's the end of the Forgiving Challenge, at least the Bible study part of it. Like that's the so that's good. That's good. So housekeeping things. Next week I will be here. Where are you and I gone? Let's look at
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the 14th, 15th, 16th.
Okay, so we might finish up Judges next week.
Whoa.
I don't know. How much more do we have? I don't remember where we are.
I don't either.
Like that.
It's in my
You looked at the thing. Okay. Like that. So we might be able to finish up Judges. We'll have to see. That'll be fun, because because we just finished Samson. And I was talking to my friend Mark, and he's like, "What did you say about Samson?" Because we're starting to talk about the spring and all that stuff. And I was like, "Oh yeah, Samson's Israel." Like that. That's the big thing I saw when going over there, because it's always like, how do you deal with Samson? And I was like, "Oh, Samson's Israel. Samson is God's people." Like that they ran after all these other gods and countries and all these things, and made the prostitute with all of them and all that. And even though they were very aggressive towards them, he always was going after them. And finally, God was like, "Fine, you can. You that's the captivity. It's the exile. Like it was over there." And then I think we see in the true Israelite, in Jesus, that he still conquers everything with the power of God, even though through suffering and all of those things. So that's at least that's how I can redeem is Samson. So we'll try to get through as much of Judges as we can next week. The week after that, the 16th, I will be gone. So will Ed. So that'll be Thanksgiving break. So that's 2 weeks that we won't have class on the 16th and the 23rd. I know some of you are like, "Man, I really want to come in on Thanksgiving." Like that's and then we'll do the 30th, and we have 30th through probably I don't know if we'll get together on the 21st or not, but we'll have those. So we may do a short one we may have to finish after Thanksgiving. We may have to finish Judges, then we'll do a couple weeks on Christmas, and because that's Christmas stuff is always fun to go through and see if I can get some people mad at me. And so that's
that without trying.
Yeah, like that with all those things. So that's kind of the game plan coming forward. So 16th and the 23rd will be an observance of Thanksgiving, and so that is what will be going on there. If you guys couldn't guess, I won't be here this weekend at Scott's preaching. He is talking about stealing. Don't steal your neighbor's life, spouse, or stuff. Those are the three. And instead, help them keep them, keep them longer. I don't know what he's doing. Mark is doing. My friend Mark is doing Zacchaeus with that, though. So that'll be good. And so that's it. So everyone is watching on YouTube. Thanks for joining us today.